He's still on the piss. He's still on the piss. Oh, Jackie Grealish, he's still on the piss. Back in the summer of 2021, there was a moment during England's belated Euro 2020 campaign that reawakened the Wembley crowd. The scoreline read England 0, Germany 0, as the round of 16 tie hung in the balance. Suddenly, the home support burst into life and began to cheer and clap and kick into song. No, England hadn't just been awarded a penalty. No, a German player hadn't been sent off. And no, Raheem Sterling hadn't even put England 1-0 up yet. The uncontrollable excitement, the release of relief, the adulation and the celebration was all because the big screen had just shown Jack Grealish taking off his bib as he was being summoned from the bench. To say that it was just the Wembley crowd who were caught up in the cult of Grealish is a gigantic understatement. I distinctly remember the pub I was in watching the game erupting at the mere sight of ITV cutting to Grealish readying himself from the bench. I think every pub, every social club and every living room across the country did. Jack Grealish was, without any shadow of a doubt, not only the most popular player in the England squad that summer, he was something more. He was different. With his off-field antics, his low-rise socks, the cheeky, chappy attitude and directness on the ball, he was what the country had been missing for all these years. Comparisons to Gascoigne would just be retreading tired ground by this point, but comparisons were made for good reason. He was young, he was fresh, he was the one. He was going to save England, he was going to save English football. If only Southgate would start him, of course. If Southgate just starts him and just lets him run at the Germans or the French or the Italians, then how could we ever lose? Don't tell him where to stand or where to go or what to do. Just get him on the pitch, Gareth. He'll find the ball, he'll dribble through the defences, he'll win us the game. He'll win us every game. Grealish was the man, and seemingly everyone could see it. It was obvious. That summer, Pep Guardiola's Manchester City paid a British record fee of £100 million for his services. This was it. The English Maverick would be playing for the best team in England under the best manager in the world. Vindication. Jack Grealish would surely go on to be spoken about as one of the elites of the game. One of the best England players not only of this generation, but of any generation. And he'd surely do it all with his unique abilities, his exciting and daring play style, and with a freedom on the pitch. The end of the 2022-23 season has come, and Jack Grealish walks away as a treble winner and part of one of the best sides in the history of the game. Jack Grealish was a first-team mainstay and amassed almost 3,500 minutes for Manchester City as he won the Premier League, the FA Cup and the Champions League. And yet, Jack Grealish is not the player everyone thought he'd be. He's not spoken about as the best player in world football. He's not even anywhere near the conversation. He's not lit up the league with goals and assists, and he's not even most people's first choice for England's left-wing position anymore. And yet, he's a treble winner all the same. A vital piece of the Pep Guardiola Man City machine that has won it all. On paper, Jack Grealish has done absolutely everything that everyone said he would one day do, and yet no one is really talking about him. Haaland is regarded as a top 2 player in world football, ready to battle with Mbappe for the Ballon d'Or for years to come. Kevin De Bruyne is heralded as one of the best midfielders the Premier League has ever seen. Players like Bernardo Silva, Rodri and Gundogan are all acknowledged as elite ballers and some of the best players in the modern game. Even someone like John Stones has received far more plaudits than Grealish. To many, it feels like Man City have won the treble and Grealish just happened to be there. Many people in the summer of 2021 would have predicted Grealish's success in the game, especially in regards to him filling his trophy cabinet. But how many could have predicted the genuine apathy that has also come with it? An academy graduate, the Grealish hype train amongst Aston Villa fans began to pull into the station towards the end of the 2018-19 Championship season, even if it would be a few years before the rest of the country would hop aboard. Following a lengthy period out of the Aston Villa squad due to a shin bone injury, Grealish would return for Aston Villa in March 2019, where he was then given the armband and made captain of his boyhood club. In the 11 games that followed, Aston Villa would go undefeated, winning 10 on the bounce before drawing to Norwich, which saw the club catapulted into the playoff places. Included in these 10 wins was a decisive away victory against rivals Birmingham, which saw Jack Grealish assaulted by a pitch invader. In a sign of things to come for his blossoming career, Grealish, pulling himself up from the turf after being blindsided by a sucker punch, would then go on to score the only goal of the game as Aston Villa won 1-0. Decisive performances in the Championship playoffs saw Aston Villa, under the helm of Dean Smith, promoted to the Premier League, where Grealish would have his first taste of Premier League football and the wider footballing world would finally be introduced to Jack Grealish. As captain of his club in his first season in the Premier League, Grealish played in 36 of 38 matches, playing the full 90 in every single game apart from one where he was substituted 6 minutes from time away at Manchester City. On paper, Grealish played centrally just as often as he played out wide on the left, but in reality, it was genuinely difficult to even peg down what position Grealish was playing in a lot of the time. Given complete control of the reins and a freedom to express himself, Jack Grealish appeared all over the pitch in any given minute and in any given moment. Sporting his tiny shin pads, rolled down socks and 90s bad boy haircut, his appearance was not the only aspect of his game that screamed throwback, as Dean Smith gave him a relatively unique in modern football license to roam about the pitch, pick up the ball wherever he could, and hunt opposition defences wherever he smelt weakness. In a throwback to a bygone era, Aston Villa felt like a team built around a talisman, allowed to roam the pitch, dribble at opponents and show off his array of tricks and flicks. Dean Smith built an Aston Villa side around servicing, supporting and covering for their most talented playmaker. Jack Grealish chalked up 8 goals and 6 assists in the league, playing a pivotal role in keeping Aston Villa up as they finished in 17th that season. The Jack Grealish champagne bottle had begun to fizz, and it felt inevitable that in the following season the cork would surely pop. The 2020-21 season would see Jack Grealish hit the form of his life, playing more consistently on the left wing, albeit still with 8 appearances as a number 10, Grealish and Aston Villa just doubled down on all the things they were doing last season. Despite Grealish's expected goals and expected assists mostly remaining the same, Grealish would beat his goal involvement tally from the previous season, this time notching 6 goals and 12 assists, and Villa improved upon their previous season, finishing 6 places higher in 11th. A quick look at some stats from FBref paints a nice picture. Grealish, already a talisman and the focus of Aston Villa to carry the ball, run at the opposition and create chances, kicked on in all regards. Per 90, he had more touches per game, more touches in the attacking third, almost double the amount of touches in the penalty area, attempted more take-ons through dribbling, completed more progressive carries, completed more carries in the final third, and completed more carries into the penalty area. Despite his final assist tally flattering him slightly, Jack Grealish had evolved into a progression monster. Allowed to play with a unique feeling of freedom and flair throughout the 2020-21 season, Grealish picked up the ball wherever he could and just simply drove it into the penalty area all on his own. During that year, no player in the Premier League completed more carries into the attacking penalty box per 90 than Jack Grealish. Before we move on to talk about Jack Grealish as a Manchester City player, while I'm here, I'd like to highlight Grealish's defensive work. Earlier, I said that one of the many ways Grealish felt like a throwback was due to the licence he'd been given to roam about the pitch, dribble with the ball and create chances. The team was built around getting the best out of him, as it was with other players who immediately spring to mind in this regard. A Mesut Ozil or a Paul Gascoigne, an Adel Taarabt or even a Ronaldinho or a Messi. Various levels of quality in that list, I know, but you get my point. Free-spirited forwards who are afforded to totally abandon any sense of positional discipline or defensive duties to simply search for space and then come to life when they receive the ball. However, Jack Grealish was a definite exception to this rule. In his last season with Villa, Grealish bettered his per 90 statistics in tackles, tackles won, contested dribbles win percentage, and he even won more total aerial duels and with a better success rate. Jack Grealish was the swashbuckling, creative English maverick, but he was also more than willing to put a defensive shift in, and maybe this is one of the main reasons Pep Guardiola coveted him so badly. After his £100 million move, Grealish, despite winning the Premier League title, struggled to get onto the pitch for Manchester City, and when he did, he struggled to make anywhere near the impact his Aston Villa form suggested he would. In the final game of the 2021-22 season, Manchester City hosted Aston Villa, with the home side needing to match or better Liverpool's result on the final day to win the title. Man City found themselves 2-0 down after just 63 minutes, and Pep Guardiola looked to his bench to rescue the result. It's telling that despite being 2-0 down and needing 3 goals to clinch the league, against his former club, Jack Grealish never made it off the bench, not even for a single minute. Despite the eye-watering fee paid for him, it was clear that Pep Guardiola was not satisfied with the player who turned up to the Etihad at the start of the 2021-22 season. Jack Grealish, in his final season at Aston Villa, played in the Premier League for a total of 2,185 minutes. In his first season at City, he only played for 1,916. This drop-off in league minutes might sound relatively insignificant at first, but remember that Jack Grealish's final season at Villa was marred by a shin bone injury that kept him out of the squad for 12 straight Premier League matches. Grealish wasn't even available for 12 matches in the last season at Villa, and he still played less in the league in his first season under Pep. Grealish also didn't start in a single Champions League knockout tie last season. His first season at Manchester City had come and gone, and despite a Premier League title, he could only boast 3 league goals and 3 league assists. On a surface level, many assumed that Jack Grealish had simply gone off the boil, another gross overpay for an overhyped English player that was never as good as everyone said he was anyway. For £100 million, surely Manchester City would be demanding a larger repayment of their faith than just 3 goals and 3 assists. But interestingly, the underlying numbers show that Jack Grealish's expected assists and expected goal statistics were remarkably similar to his final season at Aston Villa. In fact, there was almost no drop-off in any of his underlying attacking numbers. His carries increased, his progressive carries increased. He carried the ball into the penalty area even more. He had more touches in the attacking third. He had more touches in the opposition penalty box. All of the attacking work Jack Grealish was known for, he was still doing. And if anything, he was doing them at an even slightly higher rate. So, why wasn't Pep Guardiola playing him as much? Well, I think the answer lies in his defensive stats. After his move to Manchester City, Grealish attempted less tackles per 90 across all areas of the pitch. He contested less dribbles, and the dribbles he did contest he was much less efficient in. He achieved dramatically fewer ball recoveries. Maybe he bought into the relentless hype that had been built around him. Maybe it was the gargantuan transfer fee looming over his head. Maybe, as he said himself, He just expected playing for Manchester City to be easier than it was, and for the adaptation to not be so hard. Whatever it was, Grealish, while still doing similar things on the ball as he did in the past, had become undisciplined, and it's something that Guardiola wouldn't stand for. Things had to change. Reports suggested that after the title parade at the end of the 2021-22 season, when back on the team bus, Grealish confided in Manchester City staff that he knew he'd had a rubbish season and vowed to improve. Guardiola knew it too, and privately devised a way to get what he wanted from him. In his second season at the club, Jack improved in almost every defensive metric possible from the season previous. He blocked more shots, he blocked more passes, he won more aerial duels, he made more attempts to contest opposition dribblers, and his success rate in these attempts increased. He made more total tackles, he made more tackles in the defensive third and in midfield. The sharp rise in tackles in his own defensive third and the rise in ball recoveries tells the whole story. Pep Guardiola transformed Jack Grealish in ways that no one could have really foreseen. While maintaining almost exactly the same expected assists and expected goals stats, Jack Grealish is now also a disciplined winger who tracks back and works hard. He makes ball recoveries, he presses intelligently, and he gets stuck in. His role, compared to his days at Aston Villa, is alarmingly simple now. He doesn't drop deep for the ball, he doesn't roam around the pitch, he no longer looks for weakness in the opposition backline. Jack Grealish religiously hugs the left-hand touchline high up the pitch. Once he receives the ball, his job is to keep it. He uses his ability in carrying the ball to slow the play down, allow Manchester City players to flood the box, and allow City's rest defence to get into position, ready to camp opposition penalty boxes and set themselves against counter-attacks. Grealish's progression numbers remain similar, but his passing has been heavily restricted. Compared to his final season at Villa, he attempts less long passes, he attempts less passes that lead directly to a shot on goal, he attempts less passes in the final third, he attempts less passes into the penalty area. This is all pretty damning when looking at the numbers at face value, but becomes even worse when you consider that he was potentially more of a creative force when playing with Bertrand Traore and El Ghazi. He's at Manchester City now. He's playing alongside some of the world's best and most technically gifted players in the world. I could go on, but it's important that I stop myself here and state that this is clearly exactly what Pep Guardiola wants from him. Jack Grealish no longer feels like a free-spirited maverick. He no longer feels like loaded dynamite ready to explode. Jack Grealish, with all his talent, is now a controlled and disciplined cog in the Pep Guardiola Man City machine. He's less wasteful, he rarely ever gives the ball away, and this is reflected in the stats too. Compared to his last season at Aston Villa, he miscontrols the ball less, he is dispossessed less, and he makes less major errors that directly lead to an opponent's shot. His underlying creative numbers are still good, don't get me wrong. Amongst attacking midfielders, FBref lists him as being in the 87th percentile for expected assists and in the 82nd percentile for shot creating actions. But he's just simply not the beating heart of creativity for his team like he was at Aston Villa. Compare the numbers to a Bruno Fernandes or a Kevin De Bruyne and, well, there is no comparison. Shut your eyes and imagine watching Manchester City and Grealish has just received the ball high on the left. What do you think he does with it? Well, he slows down, he draws players across to him, and then he plays a 5-yard square pass to Rodri, who zips it across to Kevin De Bruyne, who plays a ball into Haaland. We've all seen this pattern of play, right? It feels like it happens 100 times a game. And that's because Grealish is no longer a focal point. He's no longer a talisman. That's the role of others in this team, and his role is to simply support them. Last season, Grealish didn't start in a Champions League knockout game for City. This season, he started in every single one of them. He played the full 90 minutes in every single one too, aside from being rested just after half-time as City thrashed Leipzig 7-0. Over the past couple of years, Pep Guardiola has spoken many times about players who can control a match, about players who have the wherewithal to slow down the tempo of an attack. Guardiola has expressed this in several ways, declaring players with the ability to do this as having la pausa, for example, but he's also spoken about it explicitly in regards to his own Manchester City team. To quote the man directly, without doing the accent, "We should spend more time in the final third, but that's difficult because Erling is always going forward. Foden has this aggression to go too. If Jack plays, he is more calm and he helps us to be all together. So when we lose the ball, we are there and the opponents cannot run at us." I think it's telling that the first thing that springs to mind when I think about Jack Grealish this season is not the tricks and flicks, it's not a mazy run into the opposition penalty area, and it's not a line-breaking pass or a shot into the top corner after cutting inside. What springs to mind, in my mind anyway, is the moment in the Champions League semi-final where he sprinted half of the length of the pitch back into defence to successfully challenge Modric and stop a counter-attack. Maybe I've been a bit too harsh on Jack in this video, and maybe I've exaggerated a little too much about the drop in his creativity and influence now he's at Manchester City. As I've mentioned many times so far, his expected goals and expected assist stats have remained remarkably similar from the first season in the top flight with Aston Villa right through to the modern day. But maybe that's exactly what feels a bit off. They have remained exactly the same. Grealish is 4 seasons on now, and he's had 4 years worth of top flight experience. He's playing for the best club in world football under the best manager in world football. And he's basically still producing the numbers he was producing at Aston Villa. Very good numbers, no doubt. Good enough that Manchester City were willing to pay £100 million for him, but they haven't improved. I think there was always this feeling of rawness with the Jack Grealish of old. A feeling that if he's playing in this audacious, adventurous and carefree way now with a 17th placed Aston Villa, just imagine how good he'll be as he gains more experience. Imagine a 2021 version of Jack Grealish, but rather than him leading the line and feeding the likes of Traore and Trezeguet, instead he's leading the line and feeding the likes of Haaland and Foden and Alvarez. Imagine him darting about the pitch, picking up the ball wherever he could and driving at the Barcelona or Bayern Munich defence. Imagine him whipping crosses into the back post or playing a ridiculous Rabona to slip in Bernardo Silva. Ultimately, this is not 2023 Jack Grealish, and it's not really close to being him. Maybe he was never ever going to be that type of player, and maybe the insurmountable hype around him was exactly that, insurmountable. Grealish wasn't bought by Manchester City to be the focal point of creative expression, and he wasn't bought by Manchester City to consistently unlock defences. Pep Guardiola has literally gone on record to state that they, quote, didn't sign him for goals and assists. He was signed because he offers a level of control to that forward line that City just didn't have before. Despite all of their achievements in seasons past, there was always a weakness to a Guardiola's Manchester City that they could be done on the counter, and I think this was especially the case for their games in Europe. It is absolutely no mean feat that Jack Grealish is a master of holding up defences, getting his team up the pitch and bringing others into play. By now, I'm confident in saying he's the best in the world at it. But, you know, here I am again, praising Jack Grealish for his elite ability to show restraint. The Jack Grealish who used to attempt back heels and give and goes in his own penalty box is the same Jack Grealish who I'm now praising for being extremely disciplined, simplifying his game and actually being quite boring with the ball. It will be interesting to see what happens as far as his England career goes. There's no doubt he'll make the squad for Euro 2024 and beyond, but will he be the first choice for the left wing? A player to slow games down, help his team keep the ball, and camp opposition penalty boxes seems absolutely tailor-made for international football and football under Gareth Southgate. However, and please bear in mind I am writing this shortly after a 7-0 thrashing of North Macedonia, an England front three of Bukayo Saka, Harry Kane and Marcus Rashford has so much goal threat that it's hard to see Grealish displace one of them. Look, I don't know, maybe I'm underselling the level of ability it takes to do the simple things Jack does. Football fans, especially England fans, have a tendency to dream about flooding the pitch with all the most creative and all the most attacking players possible, and any player who isn't playing in the back line that also isn't always looking to play the ball forward just isn't worth thinking about. I think we see this an awful lot with England fans bemoaning Southgate for not starting a combination of Kane, Foden, Saka, Maddison, Bellingham, Grealish, Rashford and of course Trent Alexander-Arnold every game. But as Guardiola has even stated himself, one of the reasons he doesn't fully trust Foden at the moment is his perceived lack of ability to know when to stop attempting Hollywood balls and risky progressive passes, and to just calmly pass the ball 5 yards to your right to allow the team up the pitch. Maybe the passes you don't attempt are just as important as the ones you do. Over the last 4 seasons, Grealish has transformed into a player I don't think anyone really expected he would become. From a raw, unabashed maverick who seemed to play every game like it was a casual kickabout in the park, to a restrained and disciplined winger who regimentally sticks to his zone on the pitch and decisively controls games of football at the highest level. I can't sit here with a straight face and tell you that I'm not at least a little bit disappointed that this is the player he has become. But I also can't sit here with a straight face and tell you that I don't think Jack Grealish is a better player for it. He's the undisputed first choice left winger for the best club in the world. How can anyone really argue with that? I still love Jack Grealish. I hope I've made it abundantly clear that he's obviously an elite footballer. But I look across to his teammate in Kevin De Bruyne and I wonder if, in an alternate timeline, that's the type of role Jack Grealish may have found himself imitating. Everyone talks about De Bruyne, quite rightly, as one of the best creative midfielders the league has ever seen. His assist numbers are off the charts. He floats about the pitch, picks up the ball in pockets of space, and is given the freedom to attempt audacious passes and Hollywood balls. And a part of me just wonders if this could have been Jack Grealish. Back in his days at Aston Villa, it didn't seem totally out of the question that one day he may become this. Instead, in this timeline, he's here to act as support for a player like Kevin De Bruyne, and also in this timeline, he ends the 2022-23 season as a treble winner. And ultimately, how can anyone really criticise a player on anything when they can claim that? Do you remember? Before the Euros, there was a footballer who nobody knows. His name was Jack Grealish. His name was Jack Grealish. And you're like, he's my baba. He's my boo 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 boo. Oh, he's my baba.